Hello, listeners. Episode 250 of Retro Encounter is on the horizon, and we are doing a mailbag episode. Please send emails to the address retro@rpgfan.com, and on episode 250, we will read aloud and respond to as many emails as we can. The questions can be whatever you like, but we especially want recommendations for games to play on the podcast, because we will be choosing one game suggestion from episode 250 for a Retro Encounter episode later this year. Now here is the latest episode of Retro Encounter. Hello and welcome to episode 242 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' off-topic podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and today we are here to talk about Yakuza 0 again, and going all the way to the end game. One Dragon of Dojima dies, so another may live, except that no one actually dies, except when Kiryu is shooting people in the head in the highway a lot.
No, they all live.
Oh, they all survive. Okay.
They're the Batman Dark Knight Rises Sleepy Time bullets.
No, they're fine. They all just tuck and roll and jump out of their cars. It's good.
All right, so when I was semi-casually shooting conservatively 25 people in the head, there was no intent to kill, and all of them survived. Got it.
Yes.
Okay, so listeners, those voices that you heard a moment ago alongside mine were Jonathan Logan.
Hello?
Robert Steinman.
I thought we were talking about the Demon Souls remaster. What's going on here?
And Joe Padilla.
I also want to talk about Demon Souls.
Okay.
Talk to me after. We'll get you on random.
Okay, new plan. This is no longer a Yakuza podcast. This is a Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart podcast. Excellent. What are we calling that female Lombax at the end? Ratchet?
Mike?
Or Femme
Mike,
Ratchet?
God. Mike, can we, before we start talking about the Yakuza, can I get you to agree to play the Demon Souls remaster when it comes out, and we will do a podcast Retro Encounter?
I will not agree to that immediately. I will strongly consider it. A Demon Souls re-release is a good candidate for a Retro Encounter episode about it. But for budget reasons, and I can't predict the future reasons, I don't know if I'll get that or even have a PS5 to play it on when the time comes. But that is a really good idea. I will add it to the big Google Doc in the sky. But for now, we are going to talk about Yakuza 0.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, when we last recorded, we talked about Kamurocho and Sotenbori a lot, and the mini-games and side quests within a lot. But we avoided the main story a little bit, and I think that that wasn't a wrong choice necessarily, but it's something that we really can't ignore this episode, because it became very clear to me, especially at the end of the game, that this is less a story about Kiryu and Majima and more a story about sort of like who they become. And what happens in 1988 sets them on different paths to the characters we're more familiar with in Yakuza 1 onwards. Like sort of coming to a head in the in one of the 45 cutscenes at the end of the game. Each of them puts on their famous costume that they're more well known for in the main series Yakuza games. So like this is like sort of making the Yakuza for several chapters, and a lot of it has to do with who Kiryu and Majima meet and sort of clash with throughout the story, with the most important of which being someone that I'm not even sure we mentioned in the previous episode, and that's Makoto. I'm not sure we mentioned Makoto in the previous episode, or we barely glossed over her.
You're probably right.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned her.
She's kind of important. A bold statement, I know, but she's kind of important, if not like the focal point of a lot of the story. Because, I mean, we mentioned, we know that Yakuza 0 isn't part of a game about real estate. It's like, it's this weird economic excess time in Japan, and they're trying to redevelop part of downtown. But the one obstacle in the way of the redevelopment is no one knows who owns this empty lot, and it turns out that a young woman named Makoto inherited it from her grandfather. So, around the middle, either chapter 3 or 4, which is I think it's chapter 4, one of the Majima chapters, he's told to assassinate Makoto Makimura by his handler Sagawa, who's not even part of the Dojima family. Sagawa is an Omi Alliance Yakuza who is working as Majima's handler while Majima's working at the Grand. Majima thinks Makoto is the name of a man who is who runs a prostitution ring, but when he locates him/her, because it's a young woman named Makoto, he finds a blind masseuse who has a very sort of sweet temperament. I think like Makoto almost is too harmless seeming for like the first 2/3 of the game. From then on, a lot of the thrust of Yakuza 0 is Majima protecting Makoto, Kiryu trying to save himself and his boss Kazama, and sort of these two paths running parallel and intertwining a bit. So, what do we think about, I don't know, like the middle chapters of Yakuza 0, like because I think this is, even if you threw out all the good stuff about the cities and the mini games and the variety, it's still a pretty good crime drama story.
I think the crime drama story is very, very good. If you know a little bit about where the Yakuza games eventually go, you know that the vacant lot, somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, the vacant lot eventually becomes the Millennium Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a small part of it,
right?
Yes.
Exactly. They don't just have this giant spire that's like a foot big, but that leads to the Millennium Tower, which is where a lot of the major action in Yakuza ends up happening at some point. It's sort of, think of it as kind of like Yakuza's version of the Temple of Time in Zelda, if that makes sense.
In one of those end game scenes, there's a bunch of "where are they now" kind of statements. And one of them is that the area surrounding the empty lot becomes the Millennium Tower, even though I don't know what it meant necessarily.
You will be spending a lot of time at the Millennium Tower if you play more Yakuza games. And yeah, I think the crime drama is really good. We mentioned it in the previous podcast, but having played this and then Yakuza 1, 2, and 3, it was almost jarring to have something that was so well told in Yakuza 0, and then to go to Yakuza 1 and Yakuza 2, which are a little bit more, I don't know if juvenile is the right word, but it just doesn't flow quite as well.
Yeah, and Yakuza 0 was made in between Yakuza 5 and 6, so they've had a lot of practice with storytelling before getting to this one.
It's interesting. They really hit their stride, I think, at Yakuza 5 in terms of their storytelling, the way that their mechanics, the way they did sub-stories. I really think they figured it out at that point. And then Yakuza 0 is that almost perfected in terms of their storytelling abilities. And then, I mean, it is a personal opinion, I think it drops off slightly after that. But yeah, Yakuza 0 is a very impressive crime drama, even more so because the fan service isn't necessarily in the plot itself. There's fan service in like sub-stories and things like that. But, I mean, you guys enjoy... Well, actually, you just enjoyed it, Mike, and you hadn't played any of the other Yakuza games. Do you feel at any point it was dependent on knowledge of what happens?
Not dependent. I could feel winks and nods happening as they happened. And at least, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, I meet someone, they get a big dramatic entrance, whether it's in the main story or in a sub-story, and then I think to myself, oh, I bet they're a major character in a future game. And I was right every time I looked one of those things up. The most glaring of which was maybe you meet a 12-year-old boy that's bullying high school students, and because this is just a mountain of a 12-year-old boy, and I'm like, well, this is weird. Why do they have a superhuman 12-year-old? And then I looked up his name on the internet, and he's a major villain in Yakuza 2.
Yes, he is.
And also you meet the Sohei Dojima's son, Daigo Dojima, as a bratty little kid, and I'm like, well, I bet he grows up to be a Yakuza boss that is a major character later. And I don't even remember which game it was in, but that also is true. Just a lot of small things like that. I noticed, and I got there were references that were escaping me, but because I went into this game with the knowledge that it's a prequel made after several Yakuza games had already been made. I did expect things like that, and it never bothered me, but I could feel them happening.
I, I will say though, and we talked about this a little bit before. I think that the Yakuza games have a serious problem with like the info dump at the end, and I would have liked Makoto's story to just have played out a little bit more over the breadth of the entire game, instead of like, okay, we are going to have the sit down 1 hour long cutscene where we explain her, we explain her brother, we explain why she has the lot, we explain why all these people are trying to kill each other, bada bing bada boom. I just think that the game, I feel like these stories would do better by having that information revealed a little bit at a time, instead of like, it feels like almost like the usual suspects Kaiser Soze moment. And I'm not a real fan of that in fiction. I like the ability to be able to figure out the mystery on my own, and I do feel like Yakuza 0, it just feels a little padded, and then you get the ultimate reveal. And I don't know, maybe you guys disagree with me on that, but I had a hard time with that a little bit.
I feel like it still wrapped up nicely, but there definitely felt like there were moments where I was like, there's just a massive amount of information. Like, I need to keep a wiki on hand to just get all my ducks in a row as to who exactly these players are, because this is getting a little bit too complicated for me to keep track of. When you throw out all that information at once rather than doling it out in smaller chunks.
I only have so much mental real estate for remembering Japanese names, and I play I play a lot of Japanese video games and read and watch Japanese things, but when you start hitting numbers in the 30s and 40s, I struggle with remembering which Japanese name is which. And there's a lot of names and places and moving parts to the story, which aren't always at the surface. It became difficult to follow sometimes, but I was invested enough I tried to keep it together.
I think one of the things that actually gets in the way of that for me is, the sub stories and side quests, because I feel like if I played the game beginning to end, paying attention to the plot the entire time, I would be able to follow it pretty well. But I take like, I don't know, hour and a half long chunks to do a cabaret club, or to like, I don't know, find someone an energy drink. And that really breaks the flow of the game for me. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it breaks the flow of the story. So after I get back to it, I'm like, all right, where was I? What was I doing?
That's a weakness of the sort of theme park game design that a lot of games with a lot of optional content have. Like it's, I mean, I think it's most glaring when I was playing Final Fantasy XIV, which is a game that I sort of will binge and then take a break from and then binge again. But like when you have a story that is sort of pathed separately from all the stuff around it, it's very easy to get off the rails a little bit. And that happened to me a little bit with this game, because for a large chunk of the game, I think probably mostly when I was in Chapter 6 and then in Chapter 10, which are both Kiryu chapters, for hours and hours, I would do a collection at the real estate office, then go out and do something for about 10 minutes to let the collection reset, and then go back to collect again. And I did the whole Real Estate Royale story that way. And so basically I had the same story mission open for at least a dozen hours on 2 occasions. So it's very easy to get derailed like that. But if you can keep it straight, or if you just mainline the story, I think it's a really good story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think it makes sense. There are a lot of characters, but like by the end of it, I don't feel like there's a lot of loose ends or forgotten plot lines. Everything's pretty tightly wound up.
I have one story thing at the end that I'm still not sure why it went that certain way. But let's talk about a couple story characters in particular. You meet them in Chapter 1, and I think they're, if not the main villains, the 3 extremely important villains. There are 3 lieutenants in the Dojima family who are sort of looming over the entire story. Kuze, Shibusawa, and Awano. And like you meet them in Chapter 1. Kuze is the boss of Chapter 1 of I think Chapter 1, yeah. And
with the best boss music ever.
Kuze's boss
So
theme
good.
goes so hard that the boss. I think maybe I mentioned this previous episode, but it makes the chapter one boss feel like a final boss.
Yes,
The
it
music is
does.
so
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I'm going to incorporate that music somehow into this episode. I think. But the thing is, those three guys, the Dojima family is the biggest faction within the Tojo clan, and it's what Kiryu and Nishikiyama were in, and the Dojima family is headed by a guy named Dojima, but his captain, his second in command, is Kiryu and Nishikiyami's mentor, Kazama. And the three people directly under Kazama are these three lieutenants. And with Kazama being out of the picture and incarcerated, and this big redevelopment project happening, it's made very clear that those three lieutenants are gunning for Kazama's spot, which could be, a pathway to being the head of the Dojima family or even the head of the whole Tojo clan. And Dojima makes it clear that whoever gets him the rights to the empty lot is going to be the next captain. So those three lieutenants, are in a power struggle, and they're sworn brothers with each other, so they're not going to fight each other or sabotage each other badly. But they're all definitely going for this, for this empty lot that both Majima and Kiryu become embroiled in. So all three of them are really important, but the first one that Kiryu interacts with is Kuze, who I would call maybe the most hard-boiled of the bunch, and he's the boss of Chapter 1, but you fight Kuze, I think, 5 times. It's something like Chapter 1 and 5 or 6, and once in 9 or 10, and once in 13 and 14, and he's the third or fourth to last boss of the game in Chapter 17. You fight him 5 times.
You just kick the shit out of him a lot. Like, it just kept happening, but it's one of those things where I think the Yakuza games really benefit from having a strong central villain, and this is a much bigger problem in Yakuza 6, where the main bad guy just comes out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, okay.
It's a little bit Final Fantasy IX Necron.
It maybe isn't that bad, but it's pretty bad. And I think the Yakuza games, much like, any kind of comic book, villainry or anything, they benefit from having a really strong central villain. It's one of the reasons I like Yakuza 2 so much. And Kuze is sort of the central villain in this game until he very suddenly isn't. But he serves that purpose very well.
He has the strongest relationship with Kiryu.
He does, and
what I find amazing about the character is his character. A lot of villains don't actually develop as characters, or the development happens like all at once. But in Kuze's case, he kind of develops as a character with every time Kiryu kicks his ass, until by the end of it, he's actually like a sympathetic, honorable character who you kind of like.
I almost disagree. I think Kuze is very consistent, and the person who's changing is Kiryu. And as Kiryu changes, Kuze is willing to treat Kiryu more like an equal. Kuze is, he's still trying to manipulate the players involved here and trying to get the owner of the empty lot, but I think he is very, very consistent to the Yakuza code, and when he screws up in Chapter 1 by failing to stop Kiryu, Dojima orders him to cut off a pinky finger, and he sits down and does it.
Yep.
I think that's something that's really highlighted, and even in the story, they say this as well. The three lieutenants, to varying degrees, are just so much more interesting than Dojima. Really,
Dojima is almost like Dojima seems useless compared to the three of them. Dojima doesn't do any fighting, and all three of his lieutenants are badasses.
Right, and that's part of I definitely see it that was partially intentional, but it still isn't a great story beat. And even in the story, they say Dojima's a man who's gone past his intellectual or physical strengths. Like he's punching above his weight, essentially.
Yeah, I think Dojima is the head of the Dojima clan for money reasons, much more than Yakuza reasons or toughness reasons. And like, to which point, one of the final bosses, I think there's sort of 2 final bosses, one of them is Dojima paying someone to do his dirty work.
I felt very conflicted with Dojima as I finished this game up, and then almost immediately started Yakuza 1. So, spoilers ahead for Yakuza 1, but, I think at this point it's kind of okay. Like, Dojima is killed at the beginning of Yakuza 1. That is what puts Kiryu in prison.
It's the inciting incident.
Yeah, and I was a little shocked because I felt like they sort of missed an opportunity to flesh Dojima out more, and they're kind of keeping him as like almost a faceless entity. If you had just played Yakuza 1, you would just know that Kiryu is put away in prison because he apparently shot this guy who just has a wicked sick perm. And it's like, okay, I was looking forward to Yakuza 0 maybe giving us more insight into him, and it really doesn't, other than he's just backing up and letting his lieutenants run roughshod over everything. And I felt like that was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but then I think you could also run into the Anakin Skywalker problem of fleshing him out so much that then his death in Yakuza 1 feels meaningless.
In Yakuza 1, I do like that he kind of dies so early on, but I wish that there was more, they would show a little bit more of him having this sort of fall from grace, because, for most of Yakuza 0, he is the most powerful man in the Tojo clan, essentially. Not in title, but with the money he brings in, the influence he has, he's essentially the most powerful one. And with Yakuza 1, he's this sort of he's disgusting and he's pathetic, and he still runs the family and such, but he's not as powerful as he used to be. And there's it's cool to see kind of the beginning of his of the lessening of his power, and then kind of to see him participating in a really despicable act and having kind of justice being brought on him for that.
I think the events at the end of Yakuza 0 broke him. I mean, that's what they had wanted. That's their aim. It was to absolutely break him and to break his hold on the clan. So they would still, have his support, I guess you could say, but his ambitions would be forever stunted. And I think that actually contributes to one of the reasons why he. I mean, this is just how I interpret it. But after playing Yakuza 0, I actually questioned maybe that's why he specifically went after Yumi in Yakuza 1, because he can't go after Kiryu. And maybe at some point he just broke and he said, I can hurt him this way. And then he made a big mistake.
Yeah, that goes into what I think is the most puzzling part of the ending. For much of the game, Kiryu is at odds with the Dojima clan. He leaves the Dojima clan in Chapter 1 to try and have his mistake, which isn't really a mistake, he's being framed for murder, but trying to get that murder charge off of Kazama, because as being one of Kazama's guys, it reflects poorly on Kazama that Kiryu got busted with this murder charge. And he thinks by quitting the Yakuza, that'll wipe the charge away from Kazama, which it doesn't. But so he leaves the Dojima, is being hunted down by the Dojima, and fighting the Dojima left and right. He beats up 2/3 of the Dojima lieutenants, and at the end, after Chapter 17, and before the credits roll, he rejoins the Dojima clan. It's like, really? Is Dojima himself and all the other people that Kiryu just beat the living tar out of for several days just going to welcome him back and let him become a legend within the Dojima? I didn't understand that. I thought that like maybe Kazama would form a new clan and Kiryu would be one of its lieutenants or something, or like Kiryu and Nishiki both would, or even Kashiwagi becoming a captain of something and him working under Kashiwagi, who's and Kashiwagi is Kazama's second in command, basically. But I never understood that. And like they communicate that Dojima is, like you guys said, punching above his weight, and maybe some of his power is unearned. But I don't know why they would communicate that and still have Kiryu rejoin. I never understood that.
In my mind, it was to keep an eye on him and to make sure that he didn't try anything, because I imagine if Kiryu is just below him and he eliminated all 3 lieutenants, I mean, he's kind of a deterrent at that point. But that's just how I interpret it. I agree with you, Mike, that it's a little awkward where he becomes a member of the Dojima family again at the end of it. But I guess that if Kiryu wasn't put into place, that the Dojima family would be in possibility of collapsing, considering they just lost all of their lieutenants.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he was just going to be a stabilizing factor.
Yeah, I kind of took it as my wife is making me watch Firefly right now, so I have to do my Firefly slam right now. It's like why they keep Jane around in Firefly when he's just a terrible human being and keeps screwing them over. Or, to go a little bit more old school, it's why they keep around Dr. Smith in old school Lost in Space. Like, oh yes, we're gonna keep around this very shifty looking dude. Like, it feels like they need to get Kiryu back in the Dojima clan to then get kicked out of the Dojima clan and go to prison. And I agree, it is very abrupt, but I did kind of take it as he is becoming. I mean, Kiryu eventually attains paladin status, and I don't think he has that in this game, but I think this is his first step into being the Dragon of Dojima. Like, he is going to be a paladin. He's going to try to make sure that this Yakuza clan doesn't get out of control.
Oh, I have thoughts on him becoming the Dragon of Dojima very soon, but first I want to move on to the second one of these lieutenants, Awano.
Oh, yeah.
Kuze reaches out to Kiryu in Chapter 1 and tries to cut Kiryu a break. And but it would involve Kiryu giving up Kazama to get information to Kuze, and Kiryu rejects him because he is one of Kazama's guys first and foremost. Kazama was his mentor, owned the orphanage where he grew up, etc. But a few chapters later, Kiryu is negotiating with Awano, who is commanding a sect of Yakuza to hunt down Kiryu, and Awano is not the hard-boiled, tough guy Yakuza that Kuze is. When Kiryu meets Awano outside of that initial meeting in Chapter 1, I forget which, I think it's in Chapter 9, but it's at a disco club, and Awano is partying with a young woman and basically grinding on this young lady while he's negotiating with Kiryu and telling him that he lives... and he's a Yakuza for the money and the fast cars and the nice clothes and all that. He sort of is into the vices surrounding what being a Yakuza is, and he makes a similar offer to Kiryu. Hey, give yourself up, team up with me, get this empty lot together, and I'll take care of you. And Kiryu rejects him as well. And Awano does not take this very well. Awano shoots the lady he was dancing with, which seems reckless. Just saying that, and tries to bluff Kiryu, saying he has a dozen men outside ready to shoot him. Kiryu walks outside ready to fight. There's no one there. So I think that sort of communicates Awano as definitely powerful, but also definitely deceptive. They mention that he is deeply involved in a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for?
In terms of collections and what's the word? Extortion.
Extortion. That's it. Yes.
There it is.
Yeah, extortion. Yeah. They mentioned that Awano is involved in a lot of the Dojima family's extortion rackets, and so he's definitely violent and powerful and deceptive. But maybe some of it's an illusion, because Awano tried to trick Kiryu to a degree, but Kiryu's extremely borderline dumbness but extreme stubbornness allows him to sort of just to walk past it. And Awano stays important around the middle of the game. It seems like he's the one who is in charge of tracking down Kiryu, but that falls by the wayside a little bit shortly afterwards.
Also, Awano, he's a very interesting character. Also, maybe and maybe not, besides Majima, he's probably got the best voice work in the game. Riki Takeuchi is really good as Awano.
I thought all three of the lieutenants had really, really good voice performances.
Yeah,
like the way Kuze raspily growls "Kiryu."
Oh, it's so
pretty good.
Kiryu.
I love the.
That was a little bit more Majima.
I love the just kind of Awano's nicotine stained voice as he just rolls out his words. It just always sounds like there's this extreme amount of vocal fry, but it's not from wanting to talk quietly. It's just that he doesn't want to grace someone with the full extent of his voice in a way. He's really good.
Yes, and at the risk of jumping around the story timeline a little bit, I want to talk about the third one of these lieutenants, Shibusawa. At the very beginning, when you see all of them in chapter one, he maybe seems like the least threatening one because he wears glasses. He's very buttoned up. He feels less, I don't know, less angry than the other two. I mean, he looks like sort of like a, I don't know, like a tall accountant or stockbroker or something. And it's clear that he does a lot of the paperwork stuff, a lot of the money management stuff within the Dojima family. But around chapter 13 to 15 range, it's revealed that he had been paying Oda under the table to report on Tachibana's real estate company, that he was the one who hired Nishitani's guys in Sotenbori trying to hunt down Makoto, because he had advanced intel on Makoto before the other two lieutenants did. And when he nabs Makoto from under Kiryu's nose, that was also his information. So Shibusawa seems like the least threatening one. But by game's end, it's revealed that he cares more about the money and power of what being a Yakuza is more than the others, and is the surprise final boss of the game. In chapter 17, during the final boss fight, they do something which I think has to be a Yakuza tradition, because otherwise it would be even sillier, where both Kiryu and Shibusawa, by putting a hand on their own shoulder and drawing it away, they remove every piece of a three-piece suit and tie to go from like 4 layers to shirtless in a single motion.
You guys can't do that?
No,
you guys can't do that.
I can't.
I did it just now.
I did
it just now.
I can't do that with a
That's how
t-shirt,
you know
man.
you're
I tried that with a t-shirt and somehow it ends up on my leg. I don't know what's going on.
That's how you know you're a true Yakuza. If you can pull that move off, just whip it off with one hand, then it's like, all right.
Oh, it's so good when they do it.
But Shibusawa, I mean, he rips the shirt off, and suddenly he's old man ripped, like a former wrestler that comes back for the Royal Rumble, and he has like a muscle gut from use of steroids 15 years earlier or something.
I was gonna say like Dick Van Dyke dancing in the newest Mary Poppins movie, like he's still got it.
all the lieutenants are strangely jacked, and it's like,
yeah, no,
it's
old
like
man muscle.
It just looks weird. Like Shibusawa's, it's like, okay, maybe I can get that, but Awano's, it just looks like they transplanted his head onto that body.
When that happens with Shibusawa, Shibusawa tells Kiryu that his father was a politician who committed suicide in disgrace for something that his father's boss did, and so he became a Yakuza so that he could be the one in power and make the moves and not be a disgrace like his father. In a way, I think that and also Shibusawa has a dragon tattoo on his back, and Kiryu has an unfinished dragon tattoo on his back, and Shibusawa even mentions, I'm gonna come out of this ahead and I'll be the Dragon of Dojima, and we all know that Kiryu becomes quote unquote the Dragon of Dojima. So I think that these 3 men, these 3 lieutenants, represent 3 different pillars of what being a Yakuza is. Like Kuze is the toughness and the code, and the whole you're gonna knock me down and I'm gonna get back up unless you shoot and kill me. And he keeps getting back up and you fight him 5 times. And Awano represents like the vice of being a Yakuza, like the fame, the excesses, the sort of clothes, cars, women kind of thing. And Shibusawa represents the sort of money and power and control. Like the real strength of Yakuza is that they are controlling businesses and police and maybe even government. And those, like, each of those 3 men represent one of those 3 pillars. And Kiryu, one by one, rejects them. Says he's not going to be a Yakuza their way. He's going to be a Yakuza his way because his idol is Kazama, the person who's working against all of them. And I think the reason of that, and part of why this game is making Kiryu, is that all 3 of those guys lack empathy, and Kiryu absolutely can't do that. Absolutely will not do what these 3 men are ordering him to do, because that would mean either betraying Kazama or allowing Makoto to die in the case of the fight with Shibusawa at the end. And Kiryu's pillar of Yakuza-dom is family. Like, I think Kiryu is staying with Kazama and making the choices he makes because he's a good person, for one, and also because I think that the thing that he was an orphan growing up in an orphanage, and joining the Yakuza in a way I think means like becoming the surrogate son of Kazama, becoming a sworn brother of Nishikiyama and others, and sort of being there for each other. Because Kiryu has empathy and wants family, he can't be the kind of Yakuza that Kuze, Owano, or Shibusawa is, and ends up going on this path to being a bizarro gangster paladin that we see in the other games in the series. So, in the way that Yakuza 0 is about making Kiryu, it's him rejecting these three men, defeating the Dragon of Dojima, Shibusawa, and almost inheriting the dragon label. And I think their tattoos have to be symbolic in some way. Sort of one dragon defeating the other dragon is a big deal, obviously, in the Shibusawa fight. Kuze's tattoo is Enma, who's like the judge of hell, who throws sinners into hell and casts non-sinners into the heavens. And Awano's is a Momotaro tattoo, and Momotaro is a fairy tale hero who achieves great fame and riches. I don't want to go into the symbolism of each tattoo, but also Awano ends up fighting Majima in one of the late chapters, either 16 or 17. And Majima's tattoo is a Hanya, which is a kind of demon. And famously, Momotaro defeats an ogre or a demon in his fairy tale. And I thought that like Momotaro fighting the ogre, but the ogre being the good guy in that fight, was a nice little bit of imagery. But yeah, this game is sort of making Kiryu and making Majima, and everything from the people that they fight and interact with to the tattoos on their backs tell the story alongside what's on the surface of the story. And I've been talking for like 5 straight minutes. I apologize, but
I think that's incredibly perceptive, and I think it's actually also a testament to how good the writing and characterization in this game is, because you narrowed right into Kiryu's longing for family, and that the Yakuza provide that, Kazama and Nishiki. And it's interesting that you said it, because that's his guiding light throughout the entire series, through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, where he is always looking for family. He was always looking for those he belongs with. And he often finds that. And I mean, the tragedy of Kiryu is that he finds it and then he continuously loses it. But yeah, interesting you said about the tattoos too. Do you think that everyone else has a tattoo that's well defined and Kiryu is still figuring out who he is? And the fact that his tattoo is still uncolored, still empty, and obviously it's filled in by Yakuza 1.
And same thing with Nishiki's tattoo of carp on his back, his fish tattoo.
Yeah, they can go any direction, and by the end of the game, they kind of pick which direction they're heading.
I think part of it is also just that they're both 20 years old, and those tattoos take a long time and multiple sessions to do. So I'm just being like the simpleton about it, I guess, of just being like time. But especially with Nishiki having the koi on his back, and there being the story about the koi going up the waterfall to attempt to become the dragon, I think is really interesting for how he must see himself next to Kiryu.
Definitely. And I think we kind of have to talk about Nishiki, just because seeing him in this game and then eventually what he becomes in Yakuza 1, I think that's the part of the story that really resonated with me, and that's what was kind of fun about playing Yakuza 0 and then Yakuza 1. Was like, I got to see this character who, in Yakuza 1, and somebody will have to help me here because I didn't play the original version of Yakuza 1. Are there still the Nishiki flashbacks in the original Yakuza 1? Okay, so those were added for Kiwami.
Yeah, they were added for Kiwami, and they deepened his story and explained how he got to be.
Okay, because without those, I think that it would almost be like, it's almost, brother levels of Metal Gear Solid, just like, okay, we hate each other. And that's cool, but I think that between Yakuza 0 and the flashback scenes in Yakuza 1, you see this character who, just like his tattoo, you guys pointed it out, he is trying desperately to reach something but he's going to get there through very, very awful means, and they corrupt him and they damn him in the end.
We mentioned in the previous episode that Nishikiyama is not a bad person necessarily, and him and Kiryu have strong brotherly feelings for each other, but Nishiki is not made of the same stuff Kiryu is. Like he is someone who would definitely break under pressure, and I think I made the comment that the lieutenants made a mistake in trying to set Kiryu up as the patsy instead of Nishikiyama, because Nishikiyama totally would have bent to one of them. But I want to change tracks again, because we've been talking about this game, this episode, like Kiryu is the only main character, and that is not the case at all. Majima, in about half of the chapters up to 17, is the hero of his own story. We mentioned at a previous episode he is sort of kept in prison in Sotenbori. He's an extremely good club manager. But really what he wants to do is get back into the Yakuza game, although he keeps being like held back from doing so. And at first his ticket to get back in is to kill Makoto, but he refuses to do that because he doesn't want to kill a blind woman. But similar to Kiryu, Majima runs into characters that are either working with him or opposing him, and Majima doesn't reject them in the same way Kiryu does, but they seem to. It's weird. They almost like all die around him, because for a while Majima is collaborating with this guy Lee, who is a Chinese immigrant, a former triad, who is Makoto's caretaker. And he's this big tattooed, muscular Chinese guy, and at first Majima fights him because he thinks that Lee is his target, and then realizes that no, this is the guy protecting Makoto. He starts working with Lee, and Lee is very smart, very kind of a schemer, a very good fighter. He supports a lot of the underground Chinese community in Sotenbori, which I thought was an interesting choice too. Like Osaka is pretty famous for having. For being a large diaspora. There's a large expatriate Korean community and a large expatriate Chinese community in Osaka. There's even movies about like Korean gangs in Osaka, the same way that you would think of New York Italians or Boston Irish. It's kind of crazy.
Where you brought up that like Kiryu rejects them, and yeah, it feels like Majima kind of takes on characteristics from those he's in opposition to,
especially Lee and Nishitani. And I want to talk about Nishitani in a second, but keep going, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, he takes even from Sagawa. Like, there's in terms of towards this is fast forwarding to the end of the game, but there's this strange understanding that occurs between Sagawa and Majima, even though Sagawa has treated him terribly, but he kind of just walks away and says, I don't think I'll see you again, but that's it. But then with Lee taking on kind of the protectiveness that Lee feels for Makoto, and we'll go into Nishitani and everything he's about, but
yeah, Lee is not. He's not non-violent, but because Lee's a fighter and a gangster and a killer, and he tells Majima, "You're not a killer, not yet, at least," kind of. But Lee ends up sort of dying in a car bomb in just a stroke of terrible luck. But I think that Lee teaches Majima that there's a line you have to cross, and then one of the minor antagonists after Lee is Nishitani, this Yakuza gangster, who works under Shimano. Is that right? Or he was hired by Shimano, and I think he's in a different family, but he was hired by Shimano to pick up Makoto.
Yeah, I think he's on the Alliance.
Or was it Shibusawa that hired Nishitani? I think it's Shibusawa. I think when Shibusawa found out about Makoto and hired a bunch of Yakuza to pick her up, it was Nishitani's guys in Sotenbori. I think I think that's what it is. But anyway,
the Kichin clan.
Yeah. Yes.
He's in the Kichin clan, which is part of the Omi Alliance.
So Nishitani's Omi and not Tojo. Got it.
Tojo.
Okay. But he was hired by Shibusawa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Shibusawa went outside the Tojo clan to work in Sotenbori. That makes sense. Okay. But anyway, Nishitani is violent and is a bit of a pleasure seeker, kind of like Awano. But like he he sort of crashes Majima's club. Majima fights him and kicks him out. Nishitani decides, "Oh, I love this Majima guy. He's completely wild," and fights him again in prison because Majima seeks out not Nishitani to get information from him. But when he meets Nishitani in prison that second time, he has to fight Nishitani again. But Nishitani is fighting him less because he has to, and more because he wants to. And this, again, I haven't played other Yakuza games, but that at least echoes, or at least it feels similar to Majima's relationship with Kiryu many games later. Nishitani,
That's a bullseye.
yeah. Nishitani fights Majima once, identifies Majima as a kindred spirit, and his relationship with going onward is admiration bordering on love. But the thing about Nishitani is that he is a little insane, but also under that definitely smart and a good fighter. So he's a Yakuza kind of like a Wano, sort of this person surrounded in vice, but is secretly a smart manipulator and a good fighter. And Nishitani, I really think Nishitani feels a connection with Majima and wants to, like he was ready to take Majima under his wing by the end of that scene in the prison. But he ends up getting betrayed by the prison guard he paid off, who I think was also set up by Shibusawa, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So, again, Majima's relationship with Lee and his relationship with Nishitani he sort of learns from both of them and gets things out of both of them, but they both die trying to help him. Which, I mean, again, jumping ahead a little bit, also kind of happens with Sagawa, like Joe mentioned, because Sagawa is killed off by the Omi Alliance for failing to secure the empty lot seconds after he says goodbye to Majima.
And I had kind of thought about that with Sagawa. What do we think of him at the end of the game? Because we see what Majima kind of thinks, and there's just this sort of grim acceptance, and I don't want to see you again, but I'm not gonna hunt you down or anything. I don't really know how to feel about him, which I found really interesting.
I don't think he's like Kuze in that he just gradually admires his charge more and more. It's more like Saga was trying to do his job, which was hunt down Makoto and keep Majima in check. Was getting increasingly frustrated when both of those things weren't working out how he wanted to. But then when he got close to it, and they have that meeting with Shimano, and Sagawa realizes that Shimano had been manipulating both him and Majima, because Shimano locked Majima in there for Majima to prove his worth a little bit, but also set up Majima to kill Makoto, knowing he would fail, so that Makoto and Majima would develop trust with each other, which is, which Sagawa was not on the same page with, because Sagawa really thought he was supposed to kill Makoto. But I think that after Majima and Sagawa learn about Shimano's plot, and Sagawa and Shimano are on different clans, but they're sworn brothers, so they definitely trust each other. And Majima was in Shimano's Yakuza family, and so sort of Shimano sort of secretly knew that he had a really talented Yakuza in Majima, but was trying to put him through fire to build him up a little bit, is my suspicion. But after Shimano tells both of them the plan, Sagawa realizes that that Majima is sort of more special than just a dog kept in a cage, and is sort of willing to view Majima more like an equal and less like someone being punished. And by the end of the game, when Sagawa knows he's failed and knows Majima is on the rise, he sort of accepts it, which is, I don't know what to think of Sagawa. He goes from villain to almost a mentor kind of character very quickly. It's strange.
His death really, it was jarring for me in an almost Scorsese departed moment of just or maybe more Kaji from Evangelion. It's it just kind of happened, and I was kind of reeling, and I still don't know what to think about it years later. I don't know what to think about that character, and I think it's okay to have characters like that in fiction. It's okay to have characters who you don't really know all their motivations, you don't really know why they behave the way they do, and then they're just gone. And for Majima, that's a part of his life that he's never going to really reconcile. It's a part of his life that's always going to be open.
It's interesting though, because I never found the character to be particularly underwritten or deliberately underdeveloped. He's a bit of an enigma. That's his character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think of him either. And going back to what Joe was saying before, as Majima is developing, he sees people die all around him, and if Kiryu, sort of his development culminates in him teaming up with his sworn brothers and taking out Shibusawa, Majima's development culminates in him kind of snapping. Like, after Shimano tells him of that plan, and Majima, who has feelings for Makoto, I don't know how strongly romantic or how strongly protective they are, but he has feelings. Majima really realized that he was partially manipulated into having those feelings. So for a chunk of the game, I guess somewhere in chapter 15 or 16, Majima just sort of doesn't know how to react. He walks through the street and just three random hooligans beat him up, and he's just lets them beat him up. And after he finds Makoto again and spends a little bit of time with her, only for her to get captured by the Dojima again, Majima just snaps. Like, I think he thinks about being manipulated, and Nishitani and his fights with Nishitani and Nishitani's death, his fights with Lee and then Lee's death, and what might happen to Makoto. And he completely loses his mind, beats up a ton of Dojima people, and then storms Dojima headquarters with ready for blood. And if Kiryu sort of ends up going through Yakuza 0 as this crime paladin, Majima sort of ends up going through it as a bit of a, I don't know, like a wild card gangster who is unpredictable, a little crazy, but still very smart and capable. Not like wild and dumb, just wild and dangerous.
He's chaotic good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Majima is an act, and I think he does it so that he can kind of do his own thing, and I'm getting a sense for that in Yakuza 1, 2, and 3, where he is far more in control than he would want you to believe. I think that part of his whole snapping in Yakuza 0 is him creating this guise, this facade that is going to allow him to act out in ways that he wouldn't be able to in those Yakuza families. I think Majima's very much in control of what he's doing.
Kiryu remains true to who he is at all times, because I don't think Kiryu could fake something being other than Kiryu if he tried. But Majima puts up this mad dog personality, I think partially to be a better Yakuza. Like, if Majima deep down is this sensitive soul who doesn't want to kill and has feelings for Makoto, but outwardly he projects maybe this wild dog personality to make people fear him more, or even just take him more seriously. And so like the beaten down Majima that was managing the Grand isn't allowed to be a Yakuza again, but Majima, the mad dog of Shimano, is a respected and feared Yakuza, so he has to be the mad dog of Shimano.
I think Majima should have killed Lao Gui, because that boss fight was absolutely infuriating.
I thought he was going to kill Lao Gui. My whole feeling was, Kiryu will not cross the line and Majima will, but then Majima didn't, which makes me reconsider his whole arc. And honestly, I don't know how controversial this will be. I didn't think any of the final fights were that challenging, but I had sort of figured out strategies that I liked with each of those characters. The hardest fight for me by far was one of the damn bosses of the real estate storyline.
Media King?
Yeah, Media King. You fight Media King, who's a Rush style fast evasive character, and he has 5 or 6 goons with him. So it's really hard to get a bead on anyone, especially with Media King darting around like a mayfly. And I ended up using all of the items I had. Like I had like a crowbar and a katana and a few other things. And you fight him in an empty room an empty parking lot with no items around, so you can't beast style an item smash like I did many times in many other boss fights. But like after that, and I get the legend style of Kiryu. None of the other boss fights were as difficult, but mostly because I just had a stupid amount of money in Kiryu. Like his after I beat the real estate storyline, every Kiryu fight was trivialized.
Yeah, that's how it was for me with Majima's stuff, because I didn't finish the real estate, but I did finish Cabaret Club, so I just used the Mad Dog style, or I think that was what it was called, to just hack and slash through everything, basically.
I'm glad you're all smarter than me and you finished those mini games, because I don't want to say that the last boss fight in the game with Kiryu wasn't terrible, but I was getting very frustrated. Laogui was no fun. I mentioned in the previous podcast that I never really jived with Majima's style. I just didn't. I don't know why, but I just never felt confident playing as him. So the Laogui fight was terrible. And then can we just give it up for the bastards with guns and rocket launchers on that
Oh my
damn
god,
boat?
what was that?
Yeah, no,
What is that part of the game?
I had to turn the game into a cover shooter. I had to go around the side where like doors jut out, and after they shot and reload, I had to run around and just go like one door closer to them, and then try to hit them both at the same time with a beast swing or something. Whenever someone has a gun in this game, you have to isolate them and take them out, and it is so annoying if there's a large crowd stopping you from getting to them, or if there's two people with guns. I used so many of my healing items just dealing with that haul of guns on the boat. But the Shibusawa fight, that was epic. He switched between three different styles just like Kiryu did, and then it culminates with some really dramatic QuickTime events. I'm revising my old rule that the only games that are allowed to have QTEs are Resident Evil 4 and God of War. Now I'm adding Yakuza 0 because the QuickTime events in this game are pretty cool.
Yeah, the thing on the boat, which like it's a side thing, it doesn't really matter. Why the heck was it that getting shot in the arm does more damage than Kiryu taking a rocket to the face?
Okay, damage in video games has never made sense ever.
Sure.
My favorite example of this is in the Soul Calibur games. Every character has a throw damage stat, right? Some characters deal a lot of damage with throws, some characters don't. So Cervantes has low throw damage, and Sung Mina has high throw damage. So Cervantes sticking two swords into someone and then ripping them out their sides deals about half of the damage of Sung Mina tripping someone over her foot. So yeah,
that's
fair.
So that's video game logic.
Yeah, video game damage never makes sense.
Yeah.
True.
And then you brought it up earlier, but the section of the game where Kiryu is just gunning people down in the car, that just went on way too long.
Yeah, there's like 30 targets you have to take out.
That's like the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where I'm just like, can this section please end? Nothing about this is fun. This is terrible. Please stop.
I didn't have to repeat any of it. I guess I got lucky, but I did not enjoy it. I wanted to get back to punching people instead of shooting people immediately after that was over.
Yeah, I have a very low threshold for when a game just completely changes its core mechanics or asks you to do something that you haven't done for any other part of the game. I have a very low threshold of getting pissed off with that. And Yakuza 0, like, I wasn't failing any of it. I was just annoyed by it. Like, this is going on too long. Like, if this was a 3-minute thing, okay, over and done with, moving on. But it was like, it just kept going and going. And I'm like, how many people is Kiryu gonna shoot?
And
as many as it takes.
And after that scene is when Shibusawa kills Oda, which is early on in Shibusawa's rise to being the main villain of the game, and also the reveal that Oda is the person that tortured Makoto and caused her to lose her eyesight because before he met Tachibana, yes, before Oda met Tachibana, he was doing just bad gang stuff in Sotenbori, which included capturing women and selling them off to slavers or brothels. But Oda is the person with the bat tattoo that Makoto was looking for. Early on, you think that Tachibana might be that person because he also has a bat tattoo, but everyone in Oda's old gang did. And you see Makoto take a sword out of her cane and stab Oda in the leg, and then which made me think very highly of Makoto. And then a few chapters later, Makoto demands that Dojima kill his 3 lieutenants as her price for the lot, which made me think much less of Makoto, because that was one of the dumbest moves I've ever, and one of the dumbest decisions anyone makes in this game. So like Makoto, she is a scared damsel in distress for a lot of the game. You're very, very sympathetic to her plight because she is only trying to stay out of trouble, and she's blind and helpless. When you're informed that Tachibana is her brother, and she is half Chinese and immigrated to Japan from China to look for her brother, you really want to see them get together. But then Makoto, when Tachibana's killed in the torture room, and Kiryu brings Tachibana's corpse to Makoto, she takes his character turn, decides she wants revenge. She goes on a sort of a last date with Majima, and then you see the scene with her demanding the heads of the 3 lieutenants. Does not work out for her, but Makoto's journey here, I'm not sure if I like her character because I wanted to protect her. The game made that very clear, and I was on board. But then she just makes a couple bad decisions in a row, and by the end of the game, I'm like, look, I'm really sorry about your brother, but what are you even doing, homegirl?
I bought it, personally. I mean, I think that at that moment she breaks, not unlike Majima, actually, and most of her decision-making from that point is made from a position of trauma, which is not usually the place where the best decisions are made. I think she has something that she knows that Dojima wants, and I think she thinks she has leverage, and she just makes a mistake. Also, I think she might be slightly suicidal at that point. And if this doesn't work out, I don't think she particularly cares. I think she might, I might be wrong, but the way I interpret it is she would almost be fine with it being over no matter how it turns out.
Yeah, Majima tells her, I think on the date or maybe a little bit earlier, that there's the famous the famous Confucius saying, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. I think she decides that out of revenge for her brother, she's willing to sacrifice her life, but it just goes so poorly. But Sarah's group is able to save her life. I don't know if we've mentioned him yet. Sarah is the head of a segment within the Dojima family, and he's a close ally of Kazama. But so, Sarah is able to save Makoto's life by taking her to a hospital after she's presumed dead. I mean, I was sympathetic to her the whole time, but I wish they never gave her agency ever, when she is the central prize to be won almost through most of the story, and I find that a little frustrating and annoying. I don't like. Is there a well-written female character in this game other than Reina, who is perfect, and I won't hear anything else to the contrary?
I think you need to go further and say, is there a well-written character in the Yakuza games?
Yuki.
And look, I love my masculine stuff. I'm a white heterosexual dude. I love people punching stuff. Dragon Ball Z is high up on my chain.
Oh yeah, I like one of those good. I like one of those good Yakuza stories, or juvenile delinquent in a Japanese manga stories where
love it.
Yeah, where
that stuff.
They exchange fists, but really they're just clashing with ideals, and. I don't know. The writing in this game, I think it's consistently entertaining. I don't know how many of these characters are well-rounded or even good, but I found Makoto unusually frustrating for having no agency at all.
I'll let our other 2 podcasters comment on that, because I'm only coming from a place of having played quite a few of these games, and I can't. I guess What's-Her-Face from Yakuza 2 is somewhere on the spectrum of a good female character, but...
Is that the one with the whack collar?
Yes. She's running around in high heels, and you punch people with her and Kiryu a couple of times. I mean it. She's on the spectrum of approaching a good character.
Well, okay, look,
not necessarily there.
Reina the bar lady in Yakuza 0 finds Kiryu all beat up in one of the middle chapters. I don't remember. Takes him back to her bar, and he tells her, I'm sorry for dragging you into this. And she says, clean yourself up. That's the last time you're ever going to tell me sorry for anything. and I'm like,
Mother figure.
and I'm like, yeah, like excellent big sister mother figure with some awesome '80s shoulder pads dress. Like lady suit on. I liked her, but I won't. I liked her for a couple lines of dialogue she had. I'm not going to call her a great character, but the writing in this game was consistently entertaining. I just found a couple points really frustrating, like everything Makoto does in the last part of the story, and Kiryu rejoining the Dojima clan after like being hunted down by them for probably weeks in game time.
Yeah, and Majima's feelings about Makoto too. I wasn't really feeling it in terms of they kind of seem to be saying that he loves her and that he cares so deeply about her, and I just didn't really buy that. I bought that he cared a lot for her,
yes.
But I didn't buy that there was this sort of romantic thing that he felt about her that Shimano had implied. And maybe he wasn't feeling that at all, and that was just like Shimano being a bit wrong about it. I don't know. And partially it's that I'm definitely putting my bias of like Majima's gay and Majima's gay and Ace, and that's all I want to hear about it.
I think you're basically right that Majima has some feelings for Makoto, but I don't think he even knows what they are. Like there's, it's he definitely wanted to protect her. I don't know if his feelings were romantic at all, but when he hears Shimano mentioned that he was planning for Makoto and Majima to fall in love with each other, Majima's like, really? And Majima doesn't know what his feelings are, but he feels that they might be false or manipulated, and that's what makes him fall into a depression for about a chapter. So like I agree that Majima's feelings are not romantic, or maybe just a weird mix with just a few splashes of romance in there. I need to play more games before I decide if I have an opinion on what his sexuality is, but I don't think he had romantic feelings for Makoto.
I mean, from my perspective, I played all of them. From my perspective, I think that Majima is
Kiryu sexual.
Kiryu sexual. Yes, that's exactly what Majima is. God. But also, I mean, it's revealed in later games. He is. I mean, technically speaking, I think he is not canonically, I guess, because they never say it. But I mean, it reads to me as he is bisexual. He is a ace. I don't think he's driven by sex at any point. That's just not his character. In fact, that's something he has in common with Kiryu. Kiryu seems to be more interested in, I guess, masturbation in this game and in future ones. But I think that that's something that we should talk about later in it. But I just wanted to bring up female characters in Yakuza, because that was an interesting topic to me. I think that the writing of female characters starts to get better. I personally think that Haruka, who you haven't met yet, is a beautifully developed character who develops logically and into a tremendously compelling character in Yakuza 5, and then they just... I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Rob, but they just character assassinate the hell out of her in Yakuza 6.
What do you call the opposite of fridging someone, but it's still doing the exact same thing?
Pretty much. Yeah. But also...
microwaving someone?
Microwaving someone, yeah.
You know what? Bun in the oven. Yeah. No, that works. That works.
Bun in the oven. Bun in the oven. Oh, not only that, bun in the oven,
I don't
and
know
also...
exactly the context around that comment, but I'm worried. I'm concerned.
Bun in the oven and also reheated storyline.
It's rough.
Anyway, yeah, it's rough, and it's very... That game was tremendously frustrating to me because of what happens, but up to that point, I think she's a tremendously well-written character. Her mentor in Yakuza 5, Park, is another very, very well-written female character. I will be fascinated to see what happens in Yakuza 7, because you actually have a female character as part of the party for one of the first times in Yakuza history.
Is she a dominatrix? I feel like she's probably a dominatrix.
She can take on the job of the dominatrix, Robert.
But how confident is she in her dominatrix abilities? Because that's important in Yakuza 0.
Look, finding one's dom voice is a difficult task. All right, and
I'm still searching for mine personally. Mm-hmm.
I love
I
that
know.
side sub story, but not because it's about. I just think the most unlikely person in the entire world who you would want to ask that question to help me become a better dom is Kiryu.
Yeah, no, that's yeah.
I enjoyed that side quest because it gave me an above average financial advisor character for my real estate company. So I think we need to pivot a little bit. I the Cabaret Club side quest, which is the biggest side quest in the Majima half of the story. I only cleared out the first two enemy clubs. I think Mars and Jupiter, two of my favorite Sailor Scouts, in fact. But
Really, Mars?
yeah, I liked Mars and Jupiter.
I like
They were
Mars
they were
too.
the tough cool girls.
I'm down with Jupiter. I mean, she's wearing Doc Martens. I'm down with her, but like Mars, really?
I
Yeah,
like Mars too. I
yeah,
had a crush on Mars.
Yeah, she was mad. I don't know which one I had a crush on. Probably Mars or Jupiter. But anyway, so those I only did, I guess, the first 40% of the Cabaret Club Czar quest. But like with if Real Estate Royale, the story thrust was defeating evil landlords and making the town a better place to live in again. The Cabaret Club side quest, and then again maybe I'm not 100% on target with this, is about, you know, exploring this burgeoning kind of business, cabaret clubs, which are basically predecessors to modern hostess bars, but also rescuing women from bad club owners that were maybe exploitative or bad is part of it. And so like when you were doing this business, you were trying to be a good club owner and trying to be there for your girls because that's what Majima does. But also, it felt like you were rescuing a new woman from each evil club by the end. But at least in the two that I did, is that fair, or is it a little bit a little bit more complicated than that?
Joe, you've played through it sooner than I have, or more recently than I have. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty fair. Yeah, it's got some weird gender politics to it, of course. And I don't necessarily mean weird in a negative way, just complicated in terms of the agency that the characters have, and it's difficult to say in the story payoff in terms of when you work through all of it, the reward is basically just, if you like the gameplay of it and getting to know the girls in the club, because I think they're really nice characters. It's fun getting to know them more. I do wish it was a bit less like, oh, you are the one who's saving me, and I'm going to flirt with you, and I just think that you are the greatest thing ever, Majima. Because especially with it being in first person, I was like, I don't want this. I don't need this at all.
It was weird that the interviews were almost like one-sided, like dialogue from a dating sim game, but with them praising him instead of you trying to make a connection with it. It was like a weird reverse dating sim game that was tonally odd.
Yeah, I can't stand that stuff. Like it's one of the reasons why, and I know Sollosi's yelling at me for falling off this, but like I fell off of Persona
Oh,
5
sure.
because I just don't like those, like, I like ice cream. I also like ice cream. I hate you. Like I hate those kinds of responses in video
Oh yeah, but
games. Like
Persona 5 is 100 damn hours, and a lot of the dialogue was gamified. I don't I have my, even though I'm a Persona obsessive sometimes, I have my issues with the series.
Yeah, and I didn't get very far in the Cabaret Club at all because I just found it tedious, and I think that just seeing the rapid expansion of the real estate minigame, even though it's a lot less involved, I think that I gravitated toward that, whereas the Cabaret Club, I just felt like I was kind of wasting time, and I just didn't find it very fulfilling.
I liked both of them, to be honest. I think that the real estate minigame, I think they both fulfilled different kind of, I guess, instincts of the game.
Yeah.
For me, I think, again, it's been a while since I've played the whole thing. I refreshed my memory, but I feel like the hostesses got more agency as you get into the higher level clubs. But even then, you're right. It's the dating mechanics are a little bit, but then again, the dating mechanics in Yakuza in general are always a little bit like that.
I admit I kind of liked taking in the Kiryu half, I kind of liked going out for karaoke and playing darts with a girl I had met in the phone club. I thought that that was sort of just cute and innocent. Oh, do you want to play darts alone, or do you want to call a girl and go on a date and go on a darts date? Like I thought
Hey,
that was
cousin.
I thought that was okay, but the weird the stuff with the women in this game, like the cat fight club is awful. The phone
Yep.
dating mini game is awful. The softcore porn videos are so awful that they made me a little upset.
Cringe.
Oh my god. So
Did you just want better quality porn? Is that what that was?
If I want porn, I will be able to find porn without any difficulty at all. Like why did they have softcore FMV porn in a video game, and you unlock them like quest rewards? It was
Folks.
so dumb.
Folks, you are aware that all of the hostesses in this game are Japanese AV idols, right?
I believe, okay, I remember reading this when this game was coming out. I don't think that's exactly the case. I think most of them are actresses.
Yuki is the only one who is, as I understand it, not an AV actress. And if you want stuff that's not softcore, well,
Well, okay, I mean, I'm not okay. This is gonna go a real weird place, and I apologize in advance.
There we go.
Japanese like softcore videos like that, and Japanese AV idols appearing in normal media is something I'm very familiar with already because I watch Japanese Power Rangers. They have had adult film actresses appear as villains on children's superhero shows at least 4 times that I know of.
it's a very different cultural context.
It is, but also like there are these things that are I don't know what the right word for them is. Like I'm calling them softcore videos, but like there are Japanese talents because they use talent as a generic term for someone that's an actor, singer, dancer, whatever. There are talents who just release a bikini video or a posing around on a bed video just for something in their portfolio. Like I literally remember Googling all of the actors in a Super Sentai show I like, and the Yellow Ranger had like 3 of these videos published because she was a popular, bikini actress for a year or something. And so like having an actress who is not even an adult film actress film something like that is something that happens, but I just I don't know why they needed it in this game. It's stupid. And yeah, I have seen entire seasons of a Japanese children's show with an adult film actress as one of the bad guys.
I don't disagree with you, Sollosi. I think that it's the addition of the, let's just call it softcore porn, because what else?
Yeah, no, it's totally like
It's-
like Skinamax at 2 a.m. in 1995.
It's weird, and I felt the same way. I think it's in my review of Yakuza Kiwame, actually, when you date a girl from the hostess bars in there, and you eventually you do their sub story, you do get another little softcore video of them, and it was just the first time I saw that, I was taken aback, to put it mildly. It was just an awkward kind of thing, and I just cocked it up to cultural differences.
Yeah, I discovered that
all
because
I could chalk it up to.
I discovered that because when I was in the early stages of doing the Cabaret Club quest, one of the properties that can sponsor you is the porn store. So I go into and so I see it on the list of businesses, and I go there, and it says, "Hey, do you want to watch a video? Here's the ones you have." And it's not a complete list. I think at the time there was only maybe 8 women on it, but they were people whose names were like friends I had made in sub stories. So it's like just by completing sub stories or meeting women in this game, you unlock softcore porn videos of them, and it's just why I was annoyed that I had to interact with that part of the game at all. It's maybe I don't know if it's better or worse than Cat Fight Club, which I also hate.
Cat Fight Club is just terrible. I agree with you 100%. I mean, the thing with mechanics like that, like let's just take Cat Fight for example. If it's fun or there's any kind of redeeming quality gameplay wise, I can sometimes forgive that. But in the case of Cat Fight Club, it's boring. It's useless. It's just like I did it once and I was like, oh, this is terrible. And then I had to do it with the real estate quest. But yeah, it just doesn't need to be there. It doesn't even feel like filler. It's just kind of strange thing sitting on the outside of the game.
Basically, in Sotenbori, that was the the software shop was the only sponsorship I didn't do, and I had messaged Jonah. I was like, "Hey, do I need to do this? Because I really don't want to do this." And he's like, "Nah, you can like still finish the Cabaret Club without getting that sponsorship." So that is the only one in all of Sotenbori that does not sponsor Sunshine.
There's kind of a neat sub story that comes out of making friends with the clerk there, but it's not worth it.
All right, now there's one more character we haven't really talked enough about that I want to bring up, and that is Kazama. He hangs over this whole story. He's Kiryu's mentor. You don't actually see him in person until one of the game's like 80 cutscenes at the end, but like every single thing that you do, it almost feels like you learn 2 scenes later, this is exactly how Kazama said it would go. Because we were mentioning that like he wanted to limit Sohei Dojima. It's like Kazama wants the best for his Yakuza crew. He knows that Dojima is dangerously incompetent, so he is holding up this redevelopment in hopes of someone besides Dojima getting the credit for it, because he doesn't want Dojima to become the next head of the Tojo clan. So Kazama, his 3 big pawns in this game are Kiryu, Tachibana, and Sarah. He wants to make Sarah the next chairman and have him take credit for the empty lot. He wants Tachibana to basically be successful and reunite with his sister, but it doesn't work out for him that way. And he wants Kiryu to probably quit the Yakuza, because he doesn't think he thinks Kiryu is almost like too good a person, or like he doesn't want Kiryu to be about that life. So he does actions that would make Kiryu want to quit, but against Kazama's wishes, Kiryu ends up rejoining the Yakuza and gets deeper into this than Kazama would have preferred. And also against Kazama's wishes, Tachibana dies before he's able to reunite with his sister. Because I think Kazama was really rooting for and supporting Tachibana, and it was just Laogui's interference and bad luck that made Tachibana die. But the way that they portray Kazama as this almost omniscient manipulator who is a brilliant strategist, outmaneuvering everyone in a way that I almost found annoying. It's like, man, it's like really this Kazama mofo is it has been in control the whole time. But then at the end, where Kiryu like meets Kazama, and I realize that Kazama didn't get everything he wanted, and is disappointed that Kiryu is going to be a Yakuza again. I felt a little better about it. But I mean, Kazama is. I mean, I don't like using the words Mary Sue or Gary Stu, but if there's one character that's a little bit too good and too successful, it's probably Kazama.
I mean, he is this sort of commanding force across the entire game. And it does get a bit annoying when it's like, you thought it was blank, but it was me, Kazama. Like, he's still a decent character as you see later in Kiwami, and a very important one in Kiryu's life, but and Nishiki's life. But yeah, he does get a bit annoying in this game. Just like, can you stop thinking for a second?
I kind of viewed him as, I mean, he's obviously the surrogate father figure, and he's what Kiryu's holding himself up to be. And part of the experience of growing up is when you realize that your father is not Superman. And later on in the stories, we find out that Kazama is not perfect, that he has made mistakes, that he's actually atoning for a sin that he committed in his youth. And so I agree. I think in this game it's a little saccharine and annoying with him because he is so perfect, but part of growing up is when you realize that your father is not perfect. And I think that plays out very well in later games. But yeah, in this game it was kind of like over and over again, wow, this dude's just freaking perfect, isn't he? And in the back of my head the whole time I'm going, we're going to find out something about him.
I can't disagree with that. I mean, the character isn't really there. It's just his plans and his schemes, and you're just kind of a rat running around the maze, and it's not exactly the most engaging kind of character to play to. I guess you actually don't interact with him, really, do you?
No. You hear part of a conversation that Kiryu has with him in prison after the game's over, and I found Kazuma's omniscience annoying, but a little satisfying that his plan didn't go like Kazuma's ideal scenario was that Tachibana and Kiryu are done with Yakuza and running a successful real estate business, while Sarah becomes the next chairman. And only one out of his three ideal scenarios played out. And so, like, when Kiryu is talking to Kazama and either telling him that he's back with the Dojima or is going to be, I think, and that Tachibana is dead, I think Kazuma is really sad, which is an appropriate ending for it. But as the game was going on, and I hear some just as planned Kazama, that I found that irritating.
I mean, I was sad when Tachibana died. It's a great moment in the game.
Yeah, that's I don't know, that's the death that I was saddened the most about. Definitely more so than Oda or even Nishitani. And I went from hating Nishitani to liking Nishitani, almost did a total 180 on him over his arc. But for Tachibana's motivations to only be seeing his sister before he dies because he's suffering from kidney failure and has one of his arms is dead from an injury, but he's a brilliant real estate businessman and mentoring Kiryu. Like, you are meant to sympathize and like Tachibana, but only for him to die minutes before getting what he really wants is really tragic.
It's tragic, and I think it's a nice story beat. There's a certain... This sounds weird. There's a certain satisfaction in not being satisfied in certain narrative constructs. And the fact that he and his sister will never get to be together almost makes it more compelling.
Yeah, no. Sometimes a tragic ending is more satisfying than a happy ending, and sometimes we want to see expectations fulfilled, and sometimes it's more satisfying to have expectations subverted in a clever way. And with this, I don't know if I expected Tachibana and Makoto to reunite, but for them to just miss each other, almost like, I don't know, in Romeo plus Juliet, the two actors like gazing into each other's eyes before Leonardo DiCaprio dies. Like, there's like a beautiful tragic plot point can be good, and I thought, like the Pixar movie Inside Out, sometimes you need sadness in your life, and it was a sad moment, but I thought it was well done.
Yakuza games like the bittersweet ending.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And when they do usually have a happy ending, they're usually not tremendously good.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think there's necessarily a happy ending to Yakuza 0. I'm sure that both Kiryu and Majima wish things had played out differently. But even though both of them sort of get what they want, Kiryu is a rising Yakuza, and Majima gets to be a Yakuza again, which is sort of what they both wanted. But so much tragedy happened along the way, and they had disappointments within their journeys, so that it's not a totally happy ending. I am in a better position now than several weeks ago when the story started, but at what cost? And we're back. I apologize, listeners, but after some technical difficulties, we had to excise the last few minutes of the recording, and I'm going to replace it with this ending bit here. So thanks for joining us for 2 weeks on 2 episodes on Yakuza 0. I had a lot of fun playing my first Yakuza game. Slightly worried it might awaken a new obsession in me, but nothing's guaranteed. I certainly enjoyed my first Yakuza experience, though. But next week we are doing another RPG Villains episode on Pokey Minch from Earthbound and Mother 3. We had a lot to talk about him during the Mother 3 episodes last month, but we're going to go even deeper into the awful kid next door next week in a new RPG Villains. Also in July, we're doing an episode all about Trials of Mana, the game that we talked about last year in July also, but this time in the context of its new 2020 remake. I had a lot of fun with the remake. I finished it recently, so that's going to be an episode in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not exactly sure when yet. And also we're doing an episode that's going to be a sort of an icebreaker parlor game kind of episode that will allow listeners to perhaps get to know us a little better here on Retro Encounter. Also in July, we're doing 2 episodes on Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together, the Super Famicom strategy RPG by the Quest team that eventually made Final Fantasy Tactics and Vagrant Story. That game received a port for the PlayStation and a pretty extensive remake on the PSP, and I'm pretty sure everyone on that podcast is going to be playing the PSP version. But after Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together, we are doing episode... I won't say what everything in August is yet, but episode 250 of Retro Encounter is going to be in August or perhaps early September. So for that episode, like we mentioned at the top of the show, please send in emails to retro@rpgfan.com. We will read any emails we can on the air, and we will be choosing a selection from those emails to be one of our Retro Encounter main games of the month later this year, probably December. So again, the email is retro@rpgfan.com. Send us any questions you like, but especially recommendations for games to play on the podcast. And speaking of rpgfan.com, you can also comment on our message boards, visit our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Twitter page, which is rpgfancom, also our Discord server, and a Twitch channel with something streaming every day. RPG Fan also has 3 other podcasts: Random Encounter about randomness, Jono is one of its hosts; Rhythm Encounter about RPG music, which is possibly coming back later this year. I can't say with 100% certainty, but there are plans happening with Rhythm Encounter. That's mostly hosted by Mike Salvato. And also Phoenix Edge, which is a weekly podcast that mostly focuses on current events. All 3 of those podcasts are linked, plus Retro Encounter, are linked on the RPG Fan main page. You can also review Retro Encounter or those other podcasts on iTunes or Google Play or however you are listening to us. Please provide whatever feedback you are willing to provide. But how can you, the listeners, reach out to us, the panelists, more directly? So let's share some social media information, starting with you, Jono.
You can hear me every 2 weeks on Random. If you have any questions you'd like on the show, just send us an email from there, or you can get me at Jono Logan on Twitter.
Thanks, Jono. And Joe, your turn.
So you can find me as one of the social media people for Facebook and Twitter for RPG Fan, and you can find me personally as at Eva Least on Twitter, on Discord, and on Instagram, and you'll hear me on quite a bit of retro. I hope Sollosi doesn't get sick of me.
And Rob.
You can't.
Right on, Rob. And as for me, you can find me on Twitter most of the time as @TheRealMonsoon, other times as @Evoker for Dogs. I'm also Monsoon Mike on RPG Fans Discord. So I had so much fun playing Yakuza 0 over the past, 3 weeks or a month. This is just, there's so much game in this video game that I was consistently surprised with every new thing I discovered. It's a good one. Thank you. Good night, and good luck.